The problem of evil. It's the single greatest intellectual and emotional obstacle to faith. If God is all-powerful and all-good, why is there so much suffering? It's a question that has haunted humanity for millennia, and within Christianity, two profound theological systems, Calvinism and Molinism, have offered competing answers. They both start from the Bible, but they arrive at very different explanations. This isn't about picking a team, but to seek understanding and deepen our awe for a God whose ways are higher than ours. Watch till the end and let me know, who do you think offers the most coherent and biblically faithful answer? Part 1. Defining the problem. The problem of evil has two dimensions. There is moral evil, the cruelty we inflict on one another, murder, betrayal, injustice. This is the evil that flows from the human heart. And there is natural evil, disease, earthquakes, famine, suffering that seems to come from the world itself. For this discussion, we focus on moral evil. Why does God permit human wickedness? And how can He hold us accountable if He is in total control? Part 2. Calvinism, the sovereign king. The Reformed tradition, often called Calvinism, begins with a non-negotiable truth. God is absolutely sovereign, not merely aware of what happens, but ordaining what happens. Calvinists look to Scripture and see a God who works all things according to the counsel of His will. Nothing is accidental. Nothing catches Him by surprise. But does this make us robots? Calvinists say no. They teach that we act according to our own desires. We choose what we want to choose. We are not coerced. However, and this is crucial, those actions still fall within God's sovereign decree. He is the one who determines the path. Consider the story of Joseph. His brothers sold him into slavery out of jealousy. Their intention was evil, but Joseph later declared, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." Genesis 50:20. One event, two intentions, human evil, divine purpose. Or consider the crucifixion. The Apostle Peter declared that Jesus was delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God. Acts 2:23. And yet Peter also said the Jews crucified and killed him. They were morally responsible for their actions. But God's sovereign plan was being fulfilled. For the Calvinist, this is the pattern. Evil is not an accident. It is part of a grand tapestry. We see the tangled threads from below, but God sees the finished work from above. The Calvinist conclusion is clear. God sovereignly ordains whatsoever comes to pass. He remains holy. He does not become the author of sin, but He works through human choices, including evil ones, to accomplish His purposes. Part 3. Molinism, the master strategist. Now let's examine the second view, Molinism, named after the 16th century Jesuit theologian Luis de Molina. This tradition also affirms God's sovereignty, but it introduces a crucial distinction. Molinists speak of three kinds of divine knowledge. Natural knowledge, God's knowledge of all necessary truths and all possibilities. Middle knowledge, God's knowledge of what any free creature would do in any given circumstance. Free knowledge, God's knowledge of what actually happens in the world He creates. Middle knowledge is the key. Before God created the world, He knew every possible choice every person could make. He knew what you would do if you were born in the 21st century. He knew what you would do if you were born in the Middle Ages. Here is where Molinism becomes precise. They distinguish between possible worlds and feasible worlds. A world may be logically possible, but given the true counterfactuals of creaturely freedom, not every possible world is feasible for God to actualize. If creatures are genuinely free, God cannot simply choose any world He wants. He must choose a world consistent with the free choices creatures would make. Using His middle knowledge, God surveyed all feasible worlds. He saw which worlds included genuine human freedom, and He saw which worlds accomplished His purposes. He then chose to actualize this world, the one that best fulfills His redemptive plan while preserving creaturely freedom. In this view, human beings possess genuine freedom. We are not puppets. When we sin, the sinful choice is genuinely attributable to the creature. It is not causally determined by God. This is why Molinists argue we are morally accountable. Because the creature's decision is libertarianly free, moral responsibility rests with the creature. Yet this raises a painful question. Why did God create a world knowing such evil would occur? Molinists respond, God desired a world where love is freely given, and genuine love cannot be coerced. It must be chosen. A world containing libertarian freedom includes the possibility that creatures will freely choose evil. Part 4. The Showdown. Both systems have been defended by Christians using biblical and philosophical arguments. But they cannot both be fully correct, so where do they differ? Molinists raise a serious objection to Calvinism. If God sovereignly decrees an evil action, critics ask whether this makes God's relationship to that evil too direct. Calvinists respond by distinguishing between God's decree and human intention. God ordains the event, but the evil intention belongs to the creature. But Calvinists respond with equal objection. If God knowingly actualizes a feasible world containing horrific free choices, critics ask why he chose that world rather than another. Does Molinism really remove God's responsibility? In both views, God creates the world that contains the evil. Furthermore, Calvinists argue that Molinism compromises divine sovereignty. In Molinism, God's middle knowledge is logically prior to his creative decree. He does not determine the counterfactuals, he merely knows them. Calvinists ask, is God truly sovereign if his creative options are constrained by what creatures would freely choose? Both traditions have deep strengths and deep tensions. Neither offers a tidy resolution to the problem of evil. Both point us to the cross, where God entered into our suffering and defeated evil not by avoiding it, but by bearing it. But here's a surprising connection. Both Calvinists and Molinists actually agree on a key confession. Despite their fierce disagreements, both Calvinists and Molinists can affirm the Westminster Confession of Faith's statement on God and evil, that God works all things according to his purpose while remaining holy. In a public debate, both James White, Calvinist, and William Lane Craig, Molinist, affirmed this same confession. The disagreement isn't about whether God is in control, but how he exercises that control. So, which view do you think best addresses the problem of evil? Calvinism emphasized divine sovereignty. God is in control. Nothing is random. Evil has a purpose, even if we cannot see it. But you must wrestle with the tension. How can a good God ordain sin while remaining holy? Molinism emphasized human freedom and moral accountability. Evil is genuinely our fault. God is not the author of sin. But you must wrestle with a different tension. If God's creative options are constrained by creaturely freedom, what does sovereignty truly mean? Both traditions are the work of faithful believers. Both seek to honor God and defend his goodness. Both acknowledge that evil is a profound mystery. If you'd like to know more about Molinism, Calvinism, or Reformed theology, check out my other videos where I do a deep dive into each tradition. See you there.